everyone. Welcome back again to Uprooted Community, where we talk about all the things faith and mental health. Thank you for joining me again. Give yourselves a hand clap. Yes, especially those of you that tune in every week. Thank you so much for being part of this community. I'm your host, Omotoke Adewale. I'm a marriage and family therapist, and I use this amazing platform to bring all the things faith and mental health. So I'm so excited that you joined this conversation today because it's going to be a really, really, really good one. I promise you. We have a very special guest here with us today he's not really even a guest. I feel like I say that about everyone, but he's part of this community, just undercover on the low, don't really say much out loud, but he's been supporting since day one. This is like my brother from another mother, really close and dear to my heart. And I'm going to pass it over to you. Can you just introduce yourself to us? Tell us who you are.
My name is Christopher Pearsall. I'm also a associate marriage and family therapist. I work in an outpatient, intensive outpatient clinic in Concord, California. I work in an integrated track, so it's a dual diagnosis.
Oh. Can you say what that means? Because some people might be listening to this and they don't know what you're talking about. So what is dual diagnosis?
Dual diagnosis, a mental health diagnosis, and typically like a substance abuse disorder as well.
Okay.
We found that like 90% of people who suffer from severe mental illness, like depression, anxiety, a lot actually utilize substances as well.
So it's kind of co-concurrent together. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for being here, Chris. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. Can you share? So this is a question that I ask everyone because I love fun facts. And I think they're just a great way to kind of open the conversation and know a little bit more about the person. So can you share with us like some fun facts about yourself?
Fun facts about myself. I am a photographer. Which I think therapy and photography kind of go hand in hand quite a bit, especially.
And he's a good one. He's a good photographer, not just somebody who's just like, oh, some people just say, oh, I'm a photographer. Oh, I like to cook. Oh, I like to do this. And they're not very good at it. That's okay if they're not. But this guy is a legit photographer. He has a whole website and everything and does a lot of photography stuff for people. So check him out.
I do okay.
Awesome. And what about like some identities that are important to you?
Identities that are important to me? Well, number one, I'm an African-American male in a predominantly Caucasian-dominated profession.
Yeah.
Not to say anything against anybody else, but I do feel like a profound sense of responsibility in the position that I'm in. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I'm a assistant minister in my congregation. So basically,
okay.
All those things and more. I don't know if anyone is more important than the other. Being a therapist, that's an identity all itself.
Yeah.
Just to have people feel comfortable enough to sit down with you and tell you some of the deepest things. That is definitely a part of my identity that I acquired, but I definitely hold very dear.
Yeah, you wear many hats, and yeah, you make a great point. There's not that many of us in the field, but it is growing, y'all. But it's very, very low. I think I read. Well, is it like less than what was the percentage? I can't remember. Either like 2% or 5%, something like that. Of us,
I think it's less than 2%, and 60 to 70% of those aren't male.
Yeah. That was the other point I was going to make, and also it is a pretty female-dominated field as well. So, Chris always used to make a joke that some people would call him a unicorn. At our old job that we used to work at, and I'm sure it probably still happens, honestly. People used to call him a unicorn because being a Black male therapist in this day and age is pretty much like a unicorn. Like it's not that many of us, and then also not even that many of like Black male therapists. So Thank you for doing this work. And you also made a great point earlier about like identities and how like there's some identities that we just kind of come into the world with, like maybe just how we look on the outside, like we don't really choose it, right? You can't really choose your race. But then there's also identities that we kind of like take on, that we decide to do, just such as like you being a therapist. So I think that's a really great point. Like, how do you feel like you've been able to kind of navigate identities that, you didn't choose and the ones that you feel like you kind of just stepped into? Like, how have you navigated those?
Obviously the ones I didn't choose. I'm Black, right? And for a significant part of my life, that was always seen, in the areas I was living as, less than,
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't realize the beauty of my skin and my culture until, I got around other people
Yeah.
that understood it, right? I had to learn after a while. I was ashamed. But I think coming into this field, after discovering the beauty in my culture and my skin, made this identity a bit easier. It actually made me feel a lot more responsibility, primarily because, I realized that if I thought this way, how many others like me thought the same way?
Yeah.
And then I also realized that, just working where I work, and, I love where I work, but I realized that even in there, I see very few African American males coming in there, right?
Yeah.
And this is to say that I know that there's a lot of us suffering, but there's few of us getting treatment. So I use that particular identity as a therapist to try to normalize getting treatment and getting support for depression, anxiety, these different things that we were never given permission to say we had.
Yeah.
Because we were just raised to just keep going, keep pushing. But these things kind of weighed on us. So I use one for the other.
Yeah. And it seems like that is also like, I feel like what makes you particularly, because like I said, I know Chris personally, what makes you stand out, right? What makes you that unicorn? Because you're so passionate, about the work, and it's not just work for you. Yeah, I feel like for you it's like part of your purpose. And it really does make a difference for a lot of people that we see, like myself included, when they recognize like, oh, okay, you look like me. So you might kind of have a different understanding of, what I'm coming in with. And especially like you said, it hasn't been normalized, in our communities, like to just like ask, even just asking for help, right? I talk to a lot of, because of the setting that I work in, I see a lot of Black men every day. And just the simple, like, it seems simple to us, to a lot of people, like the simple act of asking for help is such a huge thing. And it's so vulnerable, to do that because it hasn't been normalized. So I think just us trying to continue to change that narrative and make it okay for people to just like be themselves, share their vulnerabilities, share, I don't even really like to call it even like weaknesses, but share some of like their tender points and growing points is how I would say it. So that, they don't feel alone, right? So that's what kind of makes it beautiful. And you're talking a little bit too about like, I guess what mental wellness means to you. So can you like share a little bit more about that? Like what does mental wellness mean to you?
Well, doesn't it? I don't know. I think in a lot of ways, mental wellness is being honest with yourself.
Wow.
Being open, being able to accept the fact that you have feelings and it's okay, right? You own your emotions; they're yours, so you have every right to experience them. But I think just being honest, being open, understanding that going through life, it's hard to do alone. So understanding the value of connection, understanding values in general, how they impact your life and your choices and the things in which you do, and just being able to admit when you're not okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with admitting that.
Yeah, especially admitting it to yourself, like you were saying before, like honesty with yourself. And I think sometimes we kind of fall short with that, right? We try to have a facade with other people, you know, but that just goes to show what's going on internally, that we're also having a facade with ourselves, right? And we're not being honest with ourselves. And, you know, like you said, it's okay to have feelings, it's okay to have emotions. And I always like to say that feelings aren't final, feelings aren't facts, right? They're just what they are. They're just feelings, they're just emotions. And, you know, you kind of go through them, but it doesn't necessarily determine everything about who you are, but it's important to acknowledge them, right? Just as they're showing up. And for you, like, what would you say has been that like mental wellness journey for you? Because it sounds like you're talking from a place of experience when you talk about honesty and being open with yourself. Like, what's been like your journey with mental wellness?
Very interesting. My journey is weird.
That's one way to put it.
I grew up in the foster care system, so at that time, seeing a therapist is kind of like forced on you, even though you understand why you're doing it. Right?
It's mandatory for a lot of foster kids.
It's mandatory. And again, I'm a unicorn, so I'm being forced to talk to someone who I don't identify with at all.
Yeah.
So a lot of my mental wellness journey didn't happen. Honestly, I got married at 28. And my mental wellness journey, I didn't start being honest with myself until I was well in my 30s.
Wow.
Like 31, 32. Primarily because I was just kind of figure it out. I wasn't, I at one point in my life, I didn't think I'd live to see 21. So when I get to 21, I was trying to figure it out.
Wow.
Like, okay, what do I do now? Because I only planned for this far. And I think, it boils back to my faith. Because my faith kind of steered me to certain decisions. I had never been around people who were married. So when I was dating my future wife, we never talked about it until, my pastor sat me down and we talked about it. And it was like the best decision I've ever made. When it came to this particular journey that I'm on, it actually started with me kind of floundering. I was in undergraduate, didn't know what I wanted to do. I just took psychology. Everybody just takes psychology. And then, I took it, and one of my good friends from a church, he was a principal at a school. She told me to be a substitute teacher. So I went there, and I'm still trying to figure everything out, not knowing who I am or who I want to be. And she paid for everything just to make sure I could get in there.
Wow.
Shout out to Monty.
Destiny helpers. That's what we call those people. Destiny helpers. Destiny helpers.
Send you some people. God
yes.
Will send you some people.
Yes.
That's how you know you have favor, though, because God. Oh yeah. So I needless to say, I was there for a year, but I noticed that it was still not striking me. So so given that it wasn't, I told her, I kind of wanted to look into something else. So I ended up applying to Seneca, and miraculously I got in there. And then I started working around kids that kind of grew up like I did. I felt at home for a little bit, and I can identify that maybe this is the work that I want to do. And I was, you kind of find your purpose through that process. And then I met some God sent people. One to tell me, I need to kind of push myself a little bit, and surrounding myself with other wonderful people like yourself that were kind of on the same track in terms of going to grad school. Needless to say, grad school kind of messed me up when we first got there.
So disclaimer, y'all, we went to grad school. So we worked together. And then during our work together, we entered grad school together, graduated together. So we have a history. And like you said, grad school is a joke.
Oh yeah. Because that type of program is really not about always sitting in front of clients. It is about dealing with you.
Yes,
And
because
having
the work happens through us.
through
Yeah,
us, right?
yeah,
We're the vessel. So,
yeah.
needless to say, I think it clicked for me
Mm.
when we were debriefing, and we had to do um, a project in which we had to look and trace our family history and
Genogram.
like that genogram, right?
Hmm.
Um, and through that particular process, I realized how much resentment I have, and this was the first time I was honest with myself.
Mm.
And through that, I was able to get answers that I never thought I'd get, build a relationship that I never thought I'd build. And it was right before my grandmother passed that I was able to
Mm.
build the relationship with her and get the answers that I needed.
Wow.
And then I was able to find out where my father lived. I called, but
Wow.
I didn't get through, but I still tried.
Hmm.
And I think through that process of self-discovery, it made me realize that, like, if this gave me an opportunity to be honest with myself and be open about what I've gone through and what I'm experiencing, what I'm feeling, and
Yeah.
what my thought process is, I need to be that for other people, right?
Wow.
I need to be that support for other people. And I think, it has definitely been a journey, but,
Hmm.
grad school it gave me a lot of confidence um, in terms of the things that I valued and where I wanted to go.
Yeah.
And now it feels natural sitting in the chair. It feels
Hmm.
natural sitting with somebody. I don't force it.
There you go. Yeah.
It's definitely a privilege when people want to sit down with you. So
Hmm.
yeah, it was a long journey, just trying to figure out who I am.
Yeah.
And we're
Yeah.
still kind of figuring it out, but
Yeah. Every day, right? Oh, that is so beautiful. It just makes me think about something I talked about a little while ago. I don't know if I was sharing a testimony or something, but how like we find healing in our purpose, right? When we're within our purpose, we too are getting like
yeah,
healed and transformed. And there's just something happening within us, like as we're in our purpose. So
yeah, absolutely.
that just made me think of that. And, in our previous conversation, like off this recording, you kind of mentioned how like our early experiences, our experiences early on, like impact who we are when they're unresolved.
Oh yeah.
And it made me think about that, as you were talking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we are a culmination of our experiences in a lot of ways, and
Hmm.
a lot of times for whatever reason, we don't admit it.
Yeah.
I met someone just in one of my groups, and she was talking about, I don't like the word trauma, don't like the word trauma, but as I kind of dug deeper, everything she said was trauma, but she would not give herself the grace to actually say that I went through
Mm.
these particular things, meaning we just chalk it up to life.
Yeah.
But the caregivers we have, the socioeconomic status we grew up in, the connections that we built, the schools that we went to, um, all these things make us who we are. They all leave
Hmm.
imprints in us,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And they manifest themselves in different ways. Um, and when I look back as a young child, I had, like this foundation like everyone else did, but I can trace certain things now.
Mm.
Um, the way I think, the way I approach things, our experiences, we cannot discount them.
Yeah.
And, every experience at this point is valuable information. And, I enjoy listening to folks in terms of how they talk about their experiences because it's a process of discovery.
Yeah. Process of discovery. That is so true. And I think sometimes we try to, like you were saying, we don't acknowledge the experience because we think that in some way we have an upper hand by like choosing to ignore it, especially when people have experienced things that have been like outside of their control. So you kind of get control back by, let me just pretend this doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But what we don't realize is you're further holding yourself hostage to that experience, to that situation, and you acknowledging it, gives you power over it, right? And you acknowledging it doesn't mean that you have to stay in that place, right? If it's not such a great place. But sometimes we think that if we just try to push it away,
Yeah.
then
Acceptance
somehow it
doesn't
was
mean
just,
approval, right?
Thank you. Say that again. Acceptance does not mean approval. Yes. Acceptance does not mean approval. And awareness doesn't mean approval. Or acknowledgement doesn't mean approval. Absolutely. Absolutely. And earlier you were talking about just like some of your destiny helpers, and like you mentioned, just your faith walk and your relationship with God. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about like how you think faith impacts like mental wellness. Like how do they kind of integrate with each other?
That is so interesting to me, because when it comes to psychology in general and faith, they're not far off. Like,
come on, that's literally what I was. That's literally when I first started grad school. This is what I used to tell my dad, right? Too, like literally everything that we're learning, I used to tell him, yes, it's literally what we're talking about in church. It's literally what's in the Bible. But sorry to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, you're absolutely correct.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's almost like pitting them against each other when honestly,
no,
they're integrated.
Yes.
One informs the other all the time. Mm-hmm. It is my faith that allows me to dig deeper. My faith that allows me the patience, because I know God was first patient with me.
Yes.
And giving just acceptance and just allowing people to be who they are.
Yeah.
I can see my faith has taught me to be a better listener, number one. Because, a lot of people listen to respond as opposed to listening to understand.
That part.
And then when it comes to being a therapist, I've actually become a better minister, right? Because, we don't, a lot of time, the worst interaction we have during the day is asking somebody how they are. How you doing?
Fine. I'm okay.
I'm fine, right?
Yeah.
And that is the most vague and unnecessary response, right? Because we've been conditioned to believe that I have to be fine, so thus I'm just going to respond. It's conditioned to come out.
Yeah.
But, my faith, everybody who goes to church, we talk about coming to worship as being an experience for sinners, not saints. You know what I'm saying? Like, people are coming because they need support. They need help.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I treat, my time and my role as that same type of experience. God puts me in this seat for a reason. And, when it comes to, there's this idea from a faith standpoint that if I can just pray it away, right? But we know God has always worked through people, right?
Yes.
Through people. So what if what you're praying for, if you say, I'm praying to get this burden off my chest, I'm praying for healing. So what if what he blessed you with was an opportunity to see a therapist? Because he works through people. And we can't discount that. So sometimes your faith informs your mental health. And I because of being an assistant minister, I understand that there are some things in the church that the church does not want to talk about. Like it is almost too deep. Like we don't necessarily talk about extreme traumas in the church. We talk about it in a vague sense.
Yeah.
But that also allows me in my secular position to address that. But I can also address that biblically as well. That way we can understand both sides. Faith has definitely given me an opportunity to recognize purpose and what purpose is. Because I don't know why we're doing anything if we're not seeking purpose, or we don't think there is a purpose. And I'm growing into the belief that this is my purpose, to be a healer. I'm a wounded healer, right? Carl Jung talks about like the wounded healer, because it's hard to teach healing if you yourself has never healed.
Ooh, that is so true. Which is why I talked about finding like you're healing through your purpose. Yes. So, oh my gosh, that is so true. You just dropped a lot of gems right there. That there's a place for prayer there's a place for responsibility.
Yeah.
Right. And just you mentioned also like in our previous conversation about how like everyone needs a sense of journey and purpose, right? And you were talking about how that's where faith comes in, right? When we have that sense of purpose and sense of journey, because life in itself is a journey, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good. And I know some other identities that are important to you. You mentioned being a father.
Yeah.
And you're not just a father, you're a Black father, which we know the stereotypes.
Stereotypes is wrong.
It's very wrong because there was a study, I don't know if it was recently, that actually showed that Black fathers are the most involved parents.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So anyone listening out there, just know that that stereotype is not true, right? There's actual research, like actual statistics and research that shows that Black fathers are the most involved out of other races, genders, and ethnicities. So for you, like, how would you say, with everything we've been talking about so far, like, how has fatherhood like shaped this faith journey, this mental wellness journey, just your whole life journey in general? How has fatherhood shaped it?
My child has increased my hope for this work. Although I think it also allows me to be accountable to what I do, right? I can't go and talk to a patient or client about, steps to healing if I first can't acknowledge the things that I've tried to heal from and its impact on my kid. She has definitely kept me on my toes. Also, we always talk about self-care and making sure we take care of ourselves and fill our own cup. Well, because of her, I made the choice to leave a job to my present job to make sure I had time to spend adequate time with her. Now, this is something we talk to patients all the time about, taking care of yourself and creating boundaries around your life and different things like that. Well, I had to do the same thing. It is definitely a different feeling. Definitely a different feeling. I worked with young people for a long period of time, a long time. And now that I work with adults, you see where people are at different aspects of their lives that have suffered experiences that nobody asked for, right? They didn't ask for it, but they were given it. But now it allows me to look into my own situation, and I catch myself when I do certain things that are not positive. I'm not like the world's best father, but I understand based on clients, because clients enlighten us quite a bit.
They do.
I learn more from clients than they ever learn from me. But just things that they talk about that they needed that would have been supportive to them, I now infuse a lot of that into this thing we call fatherhood. Because I don't know if you guys realize this, but fatherhood is learning on the job. There is no book. There is no book or manuscript that can tell you how to do it. Every kid is different. Every situation is different. And we just try to figure it out. And I think she gives me the courage to go to work and to support different people. She gives me motivation to do that. I know that, I have a profound purpose as a father and as an example to support and to help other folks. And I model that daily because I want her to see it. I want her to understand the responsibility we have. I mean, what is the use of, getting a master's degree and making all this money if you can't support your fellow person, your fellow man? A lot of times we talk about giving, like, giving back to others, but a lot of people give back to others out of wealth. You don't give out of your own poverty. What I'm trying to do is give out of whatever I have.
Exactly. That's really what giving is. Yeah.
And I think my kid allows me to do that because, she definitely holds me accountable because, she's kind of sassy. So she'll tell me.
She'll tell you like it is.
Yeah. Don't discount the words of children. They will always do.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that is so important. And I feel like in hearing you speak and also like me knowing like a little bit more about like your personal journey and your life. And I also think just this not concept, but also like in you, you know, being the father that you are, and I've seen, you know, how you are with your daughter. It's it's also like you're like changing the generational, you know, trajectory and patterns.
I think
And
we all are. Like,
yeah.
I don't think anybody in my family has gone this far. But you know, as a disclaimer, because we went through that particular process, going through the genogram, I met like my cousin, and
Mm-hmm.
I got real connected with my brother, and I realized this particular generation all tried to get educated, all tried to do something different. Now, you know, educationally, I may have taken a step further, but I think there's this profound responsibility to change this particular pattern, especially in the African American community. Um, and the thing is, the vast majority of us are
Mm-hmm.
going in that way. You just don't hear about it.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah. They're like everyday things that we do, even like conversations that we're having, the things that we're starting to like normalize. Even me and you just sitting down and talking about this, right? So I definitely hear you. Like sometimes I feel like we tend to pay more attention to the bigger picture of things and we lose sight of like the smaller details, right? Because sometimes we get overwhelmed. We're like, oh, I have to be the one, you know, to break all these family patterns and curses. I was talking about it, you know, on my Instagram the other day. And it's like, let's also focus on just the little everyday things, because that's what makes the bigger picture, right? It's the small steps that we're taking.
I realized that, in talking about um, correcting some generational things, um, I built my kid. My wife bought her a bed, right? And when I was young, we were in twin beds. I
Mm.
remember that, like, because my feet used to hang over the end. I built this bed, and it's a queen size bed. Now my kid is 4, so I was
She
like,
has a queen size bed.
she has a queen
Okay.
size bed, and I'm thinking, I used to sleep on the floor with like
Wow.
a number of other kids.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in like new age orphanages, but my
Mm.
kid gets to sleep in her own bed in her own room. And I'm like, what? How does that inform her? When she comes into the house, she sees not just my degrees on the wall, she sees her mother's degrees on the wall as well.
Mm.
She sees her daddy, and this is absolutely important to me. She sees her daddy treat her mom
Mm.
the way she should be treated, because kids are always, you can tell them one thing, but they're going to pay more attention to what you do.
Yeah.
Um, because she'll tell me about it. She's like, you didn't kiss mommy today. Well, I forgot, right? But that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
And that's at home. So when I go to work, I'm trying to normalize the same types of things, right? We're
Mm.
trying. We think about like money changing generational patterns, but it's really not that. Sometimes it's just a mindset
A
or
mindset. Thank
mindset
you.
that changes.
Yeah.
Um, having grace with yourself.
Mm.
I can't tell you how many people I sit down with. They have so much grace and so much compassion for other people,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but cannot have. They have been trained to not be able to have the same for themselves.
Yeah.
So giving someone freedom to be able
Yeah.
to admit to themselves and be able to understand that it is okay to not be okay
Yeah.
and to seek support, that's
Mm.
changing generational stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely a mindset shift, like you said that. Like you just said, yeah. How I just have a question for you, Chris. Like how does it actually I don't want to turn this to a therapy session, but how does it feel for you? Like to
You're a
be
therapist.
able because literally like when you gave that example of your daughter sleeping in a bed and it correlating with like how you used to sleep on the floor, like how does that feel for you, like to just I don't know, to be able to like reflect on that and actually see like the real life examples of how her life is different than yours, and how pretty much like where you are now or where she is now, like a starting point for her. I don't know how to explain what I'm trying to say, but like, how does it feel for you? How does that feel like as a father who's been through so much and knowing that, you know, your child can have a different opportunity? I don't know. How does that feel?
It definitely makes me feel good.
Yeah.
To be able to see her laughing and joking and enjoying these things. But I also understand there's a responsibility I have. You know, I think when it comes to parents, sometimes we hide too much from our kids in terms of our own experiences. We tell them like the bad stuff, right? But we don't tell them like the overcoming stuff, or what happened along the way, the people that were able to come into our lives.
Yeah.
And I think in giving her these things, it does make me feel good to be able to share these things with her. But I also need her to understand that this didn't come by accident. My daddy had like some experiences that, you know, I need to be honest with you and open with you about. Not to say that I need to expose her to everything, but I need to let her know, because we don't want to just expect these things to happen, right? Because then we think that we've arrived and this is how life is. Well, we know for sure that this is not necessarily how life is. There's a vast majority of people who do not have half of what we have. And in terms of the mindset, even be able to go outside and put my feet in the grass, right? A lot of people don't have that. So being able to teach her that, yeah, these things are good. I love being able to give it to you. But there was experiences that led us to this point. And the things that we do shouldn't be undervalued, right? But also, you know, because you want to keep your kids humble. You don't want your kids like going off the rails a little bit. Although I think she's a humble one. She takes after her mother, so I think she'll be good. But no, obviously it feels good to be able to, you know, take a trip with your kid, and give her a bed with a pillow, and give her a room that is her room. That's pretty awesome. But that also informs my faith, because, you know, like God, you can't understate how good God has been. None of this is possible.
And I love how you just gave like some tips to parents out there, because that's just one thing that I always like kind of teeter on, because while I'm formally educated, you know, on children and child development and the things that some people, you know, sometimes might feel like, oh, well, she doesn't have kids, so how can she tell me? These are things I've heard from people. Like, how can she tell me, you know, tips and how to raise my kids? So I love how you gave that tip of like being honest with our kids, right? Like being honest about, like you said, like the good things, the bad things, the journey, the experience, right? Because I think a lot of parents try to hide, you know, their story and their journey from their kids.
And, you know, it's probably with, you know, you're trying to protect your kid, and trying to guard them. But the thing is, we also live in a world that's built around access. So if you hide something, chances are your kid can find out anyway, and be exposed to it. And we know our first teachers are always our primary caregivers, our parents and things like that. So if you're not the one teaching them, they're going to learn it. It's just where, and that where may not be in accordance to your own values. So being able to be honest with your kid, and have those honest conversations about things like that.
Do you have any like quick tips, really quick, for parents like trying to navigate that, like trying to talk with their kids about hard things? Like, what are like just maybe a couple of tips you have when it comes to talking to your kid about something hard and just being honest?
I'm no child expert. I am figuring it out like everybody else. But what I will say is this. When my kid is crying, regardless of what it is, I always make sure she understands that you have the utmost permission to do that. You can always be angry. You can always be sad. That's fine, because those are your emotions. but I also make sure she understands that, okay, there's a time for that, but we can have this conversation. And then making sure you meet them at their developmental level is important. Break it down to where they can understand and give them, you don't necessarily have to overshare, but like typically when people are babies, we give them baby food, right? Because that's what they can chew on. That's what they can take. But as they get a little older, you give them solid food, right? So you do it in increments. I think, in a lot of ways, we don't have to sugarcoat everything. Which that can do more harm than good. Like if my kid sees something and I notice she's seen it or she tells me, I always make time to have that conversation. And if I don't have that time right then, I will make sure she understands, okay, at this time, I'm going to give you this particular time.
Oh my gosh. And remember, y'all, he said his kid is 4. Because I know some people are like, you talk to your...
Absolutely.
And it's just, I just think it's mind-blowing that some people, might find that as like, might be surprised by that. Yes, you can have a conversation with a 4-year-old. You can be honest with a 4-year-old, just like Chris just said, like at their level, right? Like it's important to start talking to your kids from early on.
She watches Disney movies. I don't know if you guys seen Disney movies lately, but they deal with some real stuff now. They do it in cartoon form, and like you don't want this confusion. You want to be able to have that conversation with your kid, because right now my kid adores Moana. So being able to talk Moana, what it dealt with death. It dealt with like getting out on your own. It dealt with when you have a disagreement with your parents. It dealt with a lot of different things. It dealt with fear, and trying an identity and trying to find out who you are. And all these things were talking points. Now she's 4, so I'm able. There's a different level of talking that I do, but it is definitely conversation starter. So if that's the tool that she uses already, might as well use it.
Yeah. And these are such great points. I wish we could like keep talking about this. We might have to have another like episode or something about this, because a lot of times, parents how they were parented, right? And unless you actually intentionally try to change that, and it's a lot of work. Like you have to like be intentional about it, or else you just fall to the default of how you were parented. And granted, that's not completely your fault, but you also can't control what comes out of that. Like, and I always tell people like, I told some teenagers that I was talking to last month. I'm not going to get into a long story about it, but pretty much what I told them was, you can't control the family that you're born into, right? You can't change that, but you can determine, how you want to navigate the family that comes out of you, right? So, we always can't determine, what we go through, our journey has been, but we can try to change the narrative as much as we can, right? Which it sounds like that's what you're doing. And Chris has a beautiful relationship with his daughter. It's like the sweetest thing ever. But before we go ahead, sorry, go ahead.
My pastor gave me like these words. He told me that God gives you a spiritual family, or your connections, your friends, to apologize for your biological family.
Ooh,
sometimes
that's a good one. Yeah. And speaking of that, I want to mention something you said again, because Chris just drops gems just like naturally, like it's just nothing. Like, oh, I'm just talking. Going back to like faith and your journey, and we were kind of talking more about that. And I wrote it down, and I'm going to read it out loud because it's that good. And you were kind of talking about how like sometimes when we go through difficult things, especially like with your experiences, it's hard to see God. It's hard to know that God is there, right? And you said sometimes it's hard to see God, but when you look back on your life, you can see where he's been, like the moments that he's touched, the places that he was actually with you. And Chris, that was so good. Like, can you just say a little bit more about that, like when it comes to just, faith and sometimes feeling like God is nowhere to be found when we're going through hard things.
Life in general, I guess people don't realize exactly how precious life is in general. As a person, and trying to have my kid, very difficult, went through a lot of difficulties. But it made me realize that, and I hope I can go into detail, like typically in terms of pregnancy can only happen about 36 days out of the year, right? Mm. And conditions have to be perfect in order for that to happen, right? Mm. Not only that, for the moment of conception, when it happens, then the baby has to go through a growth process, right? Has to go through a growth process. And we also know that, I just digress. People need to normalize talking about like miscarriages and things.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that can happen, right?
Yeah.
And not only that, to bring a baby to term is a miracle in itself.
Yes.
So you're talking about, I look at my life, I'm 38. So you're telling me through this miracle of childbirth in 38 years, and we know life can change at the blink of an eye, I'm able to sit here right now, right? Anything could have happened. And I say we can look back and see where God has been, because when I look back at all the little opportunities that life could have been taken away, and I think that was God. When I was in accidents and suddenly the car spun backwards as opposed to splitting a toe, that was God. When bullets started to ring out and one went like 3 feet away from me, that was God.
Yeah.
When I met my wife at Nation's Hamburger, and I never go to Pittsburgh, never went to Pittsburgh, but we happened to be there at the exact same time on the exact same day. That was God. Wow. And I'm like, we go through so many trials, so many tribulations, but I can always look back. And hindsight is 20/20, but I can always look back and I'm like, regardless of what I may have gone through, I am sitting here, which tells me God made a way even when I thought there was no way.
Oof. Oh my gosh. I don't know about y'all, but that hit me. I literally started thinking about my own life. Like, that was God. That was God. Like, that was God. Wow. Yeah, it's powerful. And I think sometimes we get like caught up, in the pain and, the doubt and the fear that you're right. We forget. And God's just sitting like, hello, I'm here. And we lose sight of God. He doesn't lose sight of us. Right. I don't want to go into a whole message here, but I really wanted to point out what you said there, because I think it's so important, and that's so connected to our mental wellness, right? Because sometimes when we're not doing well emotionally, it's hard to connect with God, right? It's hard to see God. And that's why, like Chris said earlier, like, instead of having faith and mental health like this, like faith and mental health is like this. Faith and mental wellness is like this. It's together. Because even that is God. Like, so thank you so much, Chris. I feel like we covered a lot here, but it just feels like this conversation shouldn't end. Like, I'm feeling like we should just keep going. So if y'all want a part 2 of this, if you have any other like areas or things that you want to hear from Chris, like, please leave a comment, in the comment section, because he's full of so much knowledge and wisdom and insight and perspectives. And I feel like we always have natural conversations, and I don't want this to turn into like just us talking. But again, we can keep going because there's so much to talk about. And there's just so much there. But I want to thank you again, Chris, for joining me today and being here and having this conversation with me. There is one last question that I always ask everyone, just because I really value journey, as you can already tell. and testimony, because we see people and we're like, oh, look at that guy. He's some hotshot therapist, and we don't know what they've been through. We don't know their story. Or sometimes we see people and we judge them based on their story, right? So it can go either way, right? So for you, like, what would you say is one word to describe your personal journey and testimony, and why?
Miraculous.
Miraculous.
Because I should not be in this position. I should not be here, but yet God saw fit to choose me. And that's all I can. I know. Look, we talk about being able to look back and seeing where God has been. For two people, one from South Florida and one from Nigeria, to end up here and be on this conversation at this exact time is miraculous. And I think, and I can't understate how good God has been in my life. I am very fortunate. I don't take that for granted.
Wow. Miraculous. It's making me think of that song. Do you know Maverick City Music and Elevation Worship? They have a song called Million Little Miracles. Like literally everything is just a little miracle. It's just there. Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much, everyone. Like I said, I don't know how to wrap this up, but we're just gonna wrap it up because we have to. But please make sure you leave a comment. Tell us your takeaways from this episode. If there's any questions you have, perspectives, anything that you want more light on, because I feel like we did touch a lot of areas. But feel free to leave any comments. Chris, can you tell people where they can find you on social media or for your photography? Where can they find you?
I don't really have a whole lot of social media.
But you're there. Your photography stuff is on social media.
Christopher C. Pearsall Photography, if you want to check that out. We also got a YouTube, if we can ever get it off the ground. Black Male Therapist.
Okay. Yes. Go ahead and just follow now. Is it already on YouTube?
It's already on there.
Okay, go ahead and follow, y'all. Follow, subscribe. Yes, and I'll leave everything in the comment section of this video for you all to link back to. Again, thank you so much, Chris, for joining me today. And thank you, everyone, for joining on this conversation. And I'm looking forward to continuing to bring you more faith and mental wellness conversations because it's such an important thing to talk about. So make sure, again, to leave any comments and questions in the comment section below. And until we meet again, continue to be well, do well, and live well. Hey community, thank you so much for tuning into the episode today. I know that you got something out of it, so don't forget to leave all your comments, questions, and reflections from the episode. Also, don't forget to subscribe as we continue to build this community together. And also turn on your notifications so that you know when every episode drops. Thank you all so much again, and until we meet again, continue to be well, do well, and live well.